Hey everyone, welcome to Facebook and Instagram Marketing Week 3. This is a two-part um, kind of session. One of them is this week. Next week, it's going to be split to part 2. It's all about content strategy. There's a lot that we got to go through, so we've split it up into 2 weeks. Part 1 is this week, and part 2 is next week. Hopefully, you're all enjoying the course. Thank you so much for submitting all of your Instagram accounts that you are interested in and like and inspire you. It's really great to see that so much of you have some pretty cool Instagram accounts that you follow and brands. Of course, there's a lot of really cool stuff out there, and it's great to see that from all of you. So let's get started. So today we're going to cover a couple things: content strategy, content plan, and then we're going to get into our assignment number 2. This is going to be not due next week, but next week's class or video will kind of round out how you're going to be able to put together this next assignment. So it'll be, you could read ahead and from the assignment part, some of it you could start ahead, but you won't be able to finish until next week's class. So let's get into content strategy. So when you think about content strategy and you're thinking about running a social platform or an account on Facebook and Instagram, content is going to be a huge part of what you do and what you need to think about. And there needs to be a solid strategy behind it because it takes a lot of resources, both time and money, to be able to put together a good content strategy or just generally good content. And you want to make sure that your content is definitely working, it's resonating with your audience, it's what they want to see, they're engaging with it, and at the end of the day, it's reaching your objectives. So here are a couple things that are going to help you put together a really good content strategy. So we talked about there's going to be research and potentially an audit. This is something that if you have the resources, like a research team or just you, going ahead and really doing a whole bunch of research in terms of and an audit on your competitors. Maybe it's your existing platform that you want to revamp, looking at how your content is performing, what are some key learnings that you've had, what are some recommendations that you want to implement, and really looking at other brands in your specific industry and what's working for them. This is really much, and really at the end of the day, it's very much a way for you to really think about how you're going to move forward and what's going to be the foundation of your content strategy. That coupled with your audience. So again, we talked about audience before in a couple of other class lessons. The audience and understanding your audience and that persona is extremely important. And that's going to help you, again, put together that overall content strategy. For me and the way I kind of do things, and we do at Fleischmann and the place I work at, we have the blueprint. So for us, we use our research and audit and those findings, and of course our understanding of the audience persona to put together what we call a blueprint. And that really is getting into a little bit more detail on a couple of things that we'll get through. Then with that comes your content strategy. And then that content strategy will then inform your content calendar, publishing, etc., etc. So the blueprint itself, as I mentioned, is kind of the foundation of your content strategy. There's a couple of things that go into the blueprint that are extremely important. It's really supposed to be, ideally a one-pager that will outline a whole bunch of these things listed here for you or for your clients that will really be your guide to how you create content and publish content on your social platforms. So number one, do you have an insight based off of your research? Is there an insight that you can include? What are your objectives? What do they look like? Do you have call to actions? There could be a primary call to action or a secondary one. Are there any emotional triggers that you think that your audience is going to really tap into? There could be one, there could be two. Audience profile and their needs. So again, this is really tying back into the audience profiling and what they're looking for. the tone of voice. Is it joyful? Is it a sarcastic humor? Really identifying what that tone is going to be, because that's going to inspire the copy as well that gets written in terms of the tone of voice for the content. What about the pillars and themes? What are some of these themes that are going to be created, or content buckets? People call them content buckets as well, for you and for your brand. That will really help you do a whole bunch of things in terms of creating content. It's really going to get you the opportunity to look at how many buckets do you want to tap into in terms of themes for specific months. Sometimes you'll put more of one specific theme than the other. It really, at the end of the day, just depends on how well the content is performing, the time of year. You can always adjust that as well. And then measurement, how you'll be measured for success. And then, of course, budget, if that's a monthly budget or an annual budget, that's always great to put in there as well. So this is so important, because I think that a lot of people just, especially when social just first started, I remember people and companies just kind of saying, we just need to be on social. We just need to be on social. And not really having a clear understanding of what that platform was going to do for them. Sure, you can be on there, but if you don't have a plan, again, it takes a lot of time and money to create, publish, and establish a successful social channel. It really is something that I recommend you set out clear goals and objectives. Really ask yourself, what do I want social to do for my business? How is it going to help do blank objective? Whether it's sales, whether it's thought leadership, whether it's brand equity building, or whether it's just sharing fun moments. Either way, you need to be extremely clear about what this platform, and in this case, Facebook or Instagram, and social media is going to do for your business or your brand. Because without that, then you don't really have that North Star. The way I like to put together, goals, and how we've done it as well, company-wide, I think, we put together SMART goals. This is just general kind of a way to kind of put any type of goals together and objectives. We want to make sure that they're specific. We want to make sure that they're measurable, they're attainable, relevant, and of course, time-based. This will allow you to kind of create really specific kind of goals that you can map back to, that have a solid plan of action that you can lay down and follow, and really be able to check off your list. Because if it's not actionable or attainable, if you don't give yourself a timeline, all of these things kind of have to come together for it to really make sense. Here are some examples of SMART goals. So increase online revenue by 20% in, let's say, 2017 Q4. Grow email list by 1,000 subscribers by end of year. Increase website click-throughs by 15% every quarter. Increase positive customer service ratings by 80% in 2018. These are just kind of the ways that, they're good examples of putting together some SMART goals. So for example, if we want to increase online revenue by 20% by Q2 of 2019, so next year, if we know that that is our goal and objective, what do we need to achieve on Facebook or Instagram to reach that goal? And that's how you then set out your plan and put that together. So for me, when I think about, let's say, how do we tackle that goal from a strategy perspective, I think about three different things. So I think about content overall in general, in terms of how is our content for our social channel going to help contribute to that increase by end of Q2 in 2019. We also need to look at community management and engagement. Um, George Brown, I believe, also does have a separate community management course. So we won't dive really into this too much, but community management and engagement is definitely a great way for you to continue to increase engagement. And by community management, we're really talking about responding. We're talking about engaging with other brands. This could be on Facebook or Instagram, but for example, if on Instagram you're looking at your competitors or your people who are engaging with you, you're looking at who they're following, who's following them, looking through their profiles. It does take a little bit of time. If somebody's engaging with you, you're responding to them, you're using relevant hashtags to show up in relevant conversations. And of course, you're maybe highlighting some folks that have interacted with you on your social channel and you start following them as well. It's a really good grassroots kind of way of continuing to spread the word about your brand on these social platforms. And of course, just the overall engagement. The other thing that we have to think about is, where does paid social come into this? And for me, again, as we move on to the next couple of weeks, we'll start getting into some of that paid initiatives and how all that works. But paid social is extremely important in terms of identifying what type of campaigns you need to put together on some of these social platforms using specific ad units, whether it's amplifying content for reach, whether it's putting together a paid social campaign that is all about click-throughs to, let's say, a website. There are a couple of different ways that you can use paid social to be able to increase, let's say, awareness and engagement and reach, as well as click-throughs to potentially, kind of ladder back to that objective that you put together for yourself. And then you have to also ask yourself, what's the right platform that you need to publish on? Is it going to be Facebook and Instagram? Is it going to be Instagram only? Where is your audience really engaging more with your content? It might start off on Facebook and then shift to Instagram. We've seen this before, especially with the rise of popularity of Instagram. They're both on the same kind of mother platform, if you will, especially from a paid social perspective. I think that there's a lot of synergy that's starting to emerge on both of these platforms. But at the end of the day, they are still different in terms of demographics, and you just have to make sure that you're on the right platform and publishing on the right type of content on the right type of platform. So now we're going to get into just overall content plan. When we're thinking about some of the content plan and the content strategy, here are some of the elements that I've kind of broken this out to. So I think initially we need to think about the content framework, what that looks like. We need to look at the content themes, so the content buckets that I mentioned before. Content mix. So for example, when are you going to be posting and on what platforms? Then we're going into the types of content that you could actually publish, and then of course engagement, and we'll go through some other considerations as well. So we'll jump right onto content framework. This is my approach in terms of how I think about content creation when I work with clients. So there's evergreen content, and then of course there's campaign content. So evergreen content is what's kind of always on. It's very relevant. It could be, general topics as well, which would really actually help you with SEO. So whether if this is, on your blog or just overall, Facebook or Instagram, these are just some of the things that I think they're the essentials that, if, for example, are tied to holidays, are just more generic types of posts, kind of just that always on reminder that we're still here. Posts, which you can definitely, boost and add a little bit of paid social to increase that reach. But then there's also campaign content, and I think that I really like the approach of campaign content because I think that there are short bursts. They're very you could do them for a month or a couple of months or a quarter. And this is always great because in terms of just measurement, I think you can really see how a content is looking like and being shaped in terms of engagement, in terms of, and also like what's working and what's not. Um, it has a start and an end, and there's usually a strong call to action that's associated with it. It's very focused, and of course, it involves some paid support. So I think having this mix of evergreen content and campaign content really helps you, I think, achieve some of those goals that you would set out for yourself. And I think that you're able to actually go back and measure how each specific content is working within the paid campaign. And the beauty of it is that, of course, and we'll get into this in a couple of weeks, but you're able to kind of do a little bit of A/B testing from a campaign content perspective. You're able to create multiple versions of specific creative, whether it's the image or the copy that's associated with it that maybe has different variations of the call to action, and you're able to see which one is getting more engagement and which one isn't, and you're able to really dial back on the one that isn't, and then allow for amping up the one that is in terms of the money that you're putting against the campaign, or the paid campaign. I just think that considering that the overall algorithm on both of these platforms is very much leaning towards having paid, and not even leaning, I mean it is. If any organic content is going to have minimal engagement, it is what it is. So that's why I feel like just approaching your content from a campaign perspective is something that I would really consider in terms of your overall framework. So now we're going to get into content themes. This is what I mean by content themes. I think there are multiple brands that I've worked with that, some of them don't have 6, for example. Some of them have 3. Some of them have 4. But this is an example of what some of those look like. So I think when you think about content themes, it's about understanding what are those buckets that you can kind of go into and think about how much of those types of content you want to create. So for example, one is kind of like identified as brand core. So this type of content is really about creating stuff that is going to continue to increase your brand equity on these social channels. It's really about the brand and the storytelling of the brand. Next, there's brand product and services. So this piece of content would be highlighting products and services that, let's say, your brand or company might offer. The next is thought leadership. So depending on what industry you're in or what sector, this is the thought leadership bucket that you could kind of tap into and create content for. There's inspirational. So this is something that's more something that if your brand allows for it to happen, and an inspiration is something that is a really part of your core brand. So whether it's home decorating or it's helping out a different organization through some services that you offer or whatever it may be. I think just like overall inspirational content, I think is, for example, another way for you to kind of tap into a content bucket. Edutainment, I kind of combined education and entertainment. This is something that, if you're a brand or a company that is able to kind of tap into this bucket in terms of how you tell your story, this is one way. And then there's, of course, promotion. So if you're offering coupons or promo codes or any type of promotions, this is another way that you could do that as well. So when you have all of these together, it really kind of, you can ask yourself, well, this is 6 buckets of content here. How do I know how much I want to create? How many do I post? How many times? What does that look like? And really, it really depends on you and your brand. So, and that kind of leads us into the overall content mix. So for example, I've kind of laid this out this way. So there's, let's say for the next quarter, for example, or 2 quarters, Brand core content is going to be 10% of the content. Brand products and services are going to be 20%. Thought leadership is going to be 20%. Promotions are going to be 30. Inspiration, edutainment are going to be 10. Again, this is kind of thinking about how do we increase 20%, right? By the end of 2019. So we know that we want to lead with overall like our products and services that maybe have a call to action around learning more. We have thought leadership, for example, that is really building up our leadership in the space or the industry that folks can, tap into or sign up for more information. Maybe you have a newsletter that's going to be going out. And then, of course, the promotions. So maybe you're leveraging promotions to, again, continue to be a part of that 20% increase for your company or your brand. And the beauty of this is that you can always change this ratio. It's totally up to you. Look at how things are working. Look at what's working. Look at what's not working, and you'll be able to really change this up. You can, if for one quarter, if you see that this ratio needs to switch up a little bit differently, you need to invest more in, you want to not have inspiration at all, and you want to make sure that you're adding more thought leadership or more brand product and services. So you can move that 10% to brand product and services, so that can be 30. So it's really up to you and really how you want to shape this. So now we want to get into the different types of content. So this is how I also kind of categorize types of content. So there's owned content that you are creating, whether you have designers or copywriters or videographers on staff or freelancers that you're working with. This is the owned content that you are creating. The next one is influencer or partner content. If you have a brand that has influencer partnership opportunities or just any other partner opportunities with other, let's say publications or media outlets to create advertorials or any type of sponsored content, this is another piece of content that you should definitely consider. It's a great way for you to expand that reach, expand into your target audience through a voice that is already established, some equity that can introduce you to their audience. So it's definitely something that you should consider if you are able to. The other type of content is curated. So, for example, this is a great way for you to kind of look at, different articles, different types of content from other relevant outlets. For example, if it's news outlets and so you want to share that stuff, it's just kind of curating content, whether it's memes and that's what your audience likes and wants to follow and engages with. It's just being able to kind of identify what content that you are going to be curating and then reposting and resharing on your social channels. So when we look at overall owned, I think there's a couple of things that you gotta assess your assets and existing resources. So if you're putting together a content plan and you want to start creating content, I think a couple of things is good for you to do. One, go into, ask your boss or your company, do you have a photo bank? Are there existing videos? Are there existing graphics? What articles or press clippings or blogs are being created or published? Are there existing webinars or podcasts? Are there archives for newsletters? This is really you assessing what already exists. This will help you identify what you have to work with in terms of that initial buildup of content that you can maybe repurpose just to kind of get you started or revisit at certain points or times of the year. It's going to be really beneficial for you to be able to do this because then you're able to look at, how are you going to create the other newer owned pieces of content. So do you have access to a photographer? Do you have access to a videographer, an editor? a designer, a copywriter? Just maybe, do you have a team that you could work with to kind of put together? My when I create content for brands, I mean, fortunately, we have a team. So we have a overall strategist, we have a copywriter, creative director, an art director, designer, depending on what level of content is being created. And all of those folks are kind of working together to create the pieces of content that is going to do work really well for the brand. I mean, if you don't have access to a team, it's not the end of the world. There are a whole bunch of tools that we will go into next week that will help you create some pretty cool content. A lot of them offer free trials. Some of them are actually flat out free. And you'll be able to kind of create content. And the great thing is you have your phone. Like your phone, iPhones, now are really great at capturing solid, high quality images and videos. The beauty of it is that you can edit on a whole bunch of different apps on your iPhone. It really is something that you don't necessarily need a video crew, for example, or you don't necessarily need an animator or a solid graphic designer. It really depends on your brand. If your brand really is going to be known for creating high-end quality, then maybe that's something you need to think about investing in. But if not, I mean, you could think about how you can get scrappy and be able to create some pretty fun content. Like think about a lot of the content that goes viral, for example, is people just shooting stuff on their phone. Like when you think about initially the Vine stars, for example. I mean, Vine doesn't exist anymore, but that was just 6 seconds of content that you would be able to create on your phone, and people got creative with it. So if you want to think about taking a tutorial on how to edit videos on iMovie, for example, it's a really simple software that you can learn how to edit some really quick videos on. And there are other softwares out there as well, but it really just depends on the type of content that you're looking to publish on your channel. Another way is if you do have a little bit of budget, you could look at some really solid freelancers that are available that you want to work with, and they should also be able to help you out. So then we're going to get into that partner and influencer piece as well. So this is a great way for you to work with content creators that have already established a following. They know how to create good content. This is an opportunity for you to say, okay, if I don't have resources myself to create the quality of the content that I'm looking for or the type of content that I'm looking for, I could partner with influencers. I could partner with media partners, or even, at a certain point, ask my audience and my community to create some user-generated content that I could repost as well. These are all ways that many big brands, create content. I mean, sometimes it can get expensive. Don't get me wrong. Like it's working with some big influencers requires some serious money, but those are massive macro influencers. There are opportunities for you to research and find more micro influencers that'll potentially do some cool stuff for you for maybe a couple $100. It's something that you have to, work with them on. But they'll be able to create the content with you and for you that they'll publish on their channels. You could share it on your channels. You could apply paid dollars to amplify the reach. There could be a great call to action. We see this all the time, and you do too in your newsfeed. With media partners, there's opportunities to create advertorial, sponsored content. BuzzFeed does this all the time with brands, for example. When you see something that's sponsored, it usually is sponsored by a brand. And this is just content that you could share on your own channels as well. And of course, this from an audience perspective, when they see that it's coming from BuzzFeed, even though it's sponsored, there's still a lot of equity in that in terms of being able to, to have your brand, be a part of a BuzzFeed article or the BuzzFeed brand itself. And then user-generated content, it's one of those things where if you have an active and engaged community and you put a call out there, we see this all the time. The internet does some pretty amazing things. It does give you, if you're really protective of your brand, there might be, maybe this is something that you have to think about because you're kind of giving away a little bit of control. But there are other ways that you can kind of just get people to create content and submit, whether it's through a third-party portal or but usually the best way to do it is if somebody creates content and tags you. And you see this all the time as well. This is really common. For example, if you follow musicians and dancers, for example, and you see all these dance challenges. So you had the In My Feelings challenge with Drake over the summer. Then you had the Level Up challenge with Sierra. For example, those are all examples of user-generated content that really is just spreading the word about the artist's song, for example, in that specific case, that you are able to, that the audience and just the world is able to take part in and create content. And some of the stuff is amazing. Like some of them are really homemade and guerrilla style, but amazing. Some of them are a little bit more polished and better produced, and those are amazing as well. But when you put that call out and you have an engaged brand and an engaged audience, it's a fantastic way to continue to get your audience engaged and get some pretty cool stuff out of it as well. So then we're going to look at curated content. So as mentioned before, this is something that you kind of look at, what other content can you share beyond user-generated stuff, but are there blog posts? Are there outlets or other blogs that you follow that are relevant that you could kind of look at? Are there specific news outlets? Are there white papers? Are there images or videos? This is you kind of doing your daily monitoring and scrolling through to see if there's anything that could be repurposed for your site. It's an opportunity to get your brand engaged with another brand. Maybe it has a larger following. Maybe they might start following you if you share their materials as well. So it's a great way for you to kind of find, even if it's like 5 pieces a month, that's still 5 pieces of content that you could share that you might just have to write a line of copy or a couple lines of copy that you could share on either Facebook or Instagram. But nonetheless, I mean, if you can find that 4 or 5 pieces of content per month, I think you'd be in pretty good shape. Here's a great way for you to kind of do that in terms of curating content. So kind of put a list together of what sources you follow, put some details in terms of the types of sources they are, the links. This is really great. It could be a growing list. It could be an ever-changing list. If you are a manager, social media manager, and you have maybe an intern or a junior staff member that you can kind of give this list to, they can be in charge of. They could do the daily monitoring. They could create a list of opportunities for you to repost, let's say on a daily basis or a weekly basis, whatever works for you. But I think having a solid list of people or outlets that you think are really good from a curated perspective, this is a great way for you to do it. Make a list and use it. So now we're going to get into engagement. I kind of spoke about community management before and really kind of explained that community management is definitely extremely important. But, and again, kind of George Brown College has a course dedicated to community management. So, if you're really interested in a lot more of the details on that, then make sure you check that out. But, if you're a brand on Facebook, for example, or even Instagram direct messages, somebody reaches out, has a question. If you're, let's say, a restaurant or another kind of company that has food, that serves food or is involved in the food and services industry, maybe there's a complaint, maybe something is happened and they're reaching out to you. The goal is to really be able to answer in a timely manner. Make sure you are kind of continuously checking and monitoring activity on your social channels. Maybe you have a junior staff member that is able to be, this is, going to be a part of their daily duties and responsibilities. Another helpful thing is to put together in your planning process a little bit of an FAQ, like frequently asked questions, or a response protocol for that community manager. And by response protocol, it's really about establishing different scenarios. Again, if you're a food and services kind of brand, if you're what are some of the protocols that have to be in place and approved answers for that junior staff member so that they can continue to engage appropriately. So creating that response protocol is super important and critical because you avoid having to go through approvals, and basically it creates those scenarios of if a person basically connects with us with this scenario, this is how we respond. If they come to us with this question, this is how we respond. If it escalates, this is how we respond. And that isn't only even just on private messaging, but even on on comment section. Like, how do we address different situations when a conversation and a discussion starts happening on one of our pieces of content. For the community manager, this is extremely important to know, and I think that another thing to keep in mind is you always want to take stuff from that public forum to the private message forum. However, that doesn't mean that you can act reckless, because it's now moved on to direct messages or just Messenger and it's now a one-on-one kind of discussion, it doesn't mean that other person can't take screenshots of that and post them publicly again. So I think it's really important that if you have somebody answering questions or managing your brand, that they are armed and ready and know what the different protocols are in terms of responses. They know when and how and who to escalate different issues to in a timely manner. It's really critical that you have this in place, because if, for example, you have a crisis on your hands on social, it's gonna be extremely helpful. Another way in terms of engagement is doing live Q&As. For maybe you do a live broadcast and there's a Q&A session, you're able to continuously increase that engagement through that as well. And then, what else? Like, there's some other way, if they have any other ideas in terms of how to create engagement, let me know. And I think that new features are always being added. So, the possibilities are continuing to grow. But at the end of the day, just knowing that engagement is something that's really critical and important on how you, kind of continue to grow your community and reach those objectives. So, something to definitely think about. So now we're going to get into some other considerations. I think having a clear call to action is really important. I think, again, going back to what is your desired outcome, and then, of course, have you been testing? So in terms of desired outcome, is it, is the copy saying watch the video? Is it saying download through this link? Is it saying sign up to our newsletter? Is it saying buy now? Like, you have to really think about, again, and this kind of goes into like more of that campaign specific content as well. If you don't have a call to action for that campaign, it kind of is pointless. And I think that really think about how that CTA is going to be working and where it's placed in the content. So for example, if you have video content, usually, most video content sees a drop in views, after the first like 10, 15 seconds. So if you know that your audience is not going to watch more than 15 seconds of video, and you're publishing a 30-second, 60-second video, that's okay. But make sure that, the initial 10 seconds is going to be something that maybe your call to action or your website is like right up at the front or whatever that may be, or it's something that's unexpected that's going to get them to continue to watch. Think about these things as you're creating these types of content in terms of where your call to action is going to be placed. And I think that'll really help you kind of achieve those goals as well. And then again, have you been testing? I kind of brought this up earlier as well. So, I really recommend, especially if you're going into a paid campaign, creating different variations of the content and the creative. This isn't, there are specific software that you can use. Again, if you have the resources, there's specific software that you can use that will give you the opportunity to really look at and examine your content and with your audience. So, for example, the types of colors that are being used in your creative, the types of copy that are being used, and the words that are being used. There is software that can analyze and has data on specific audience groups in terms of what they would react to more, and you can use that data to inform how you build your content. Again, A/B testing for campaigns that you have. If you don't have that, opportunity to work with software like that, just being able to create, let's say, 3 different versions of the copy, maybe 3 different versions or 3 images. And then you'll be able to kind of mix and match and see which one is performing better and be able to allocate and stop one from appearing in a newsfeed and have the one that's actually engaging more get pumped with that more with more of the funds that you had in your paid campaign. And all of this is really going to be a part of that content matrix that you'll be able to kind of come up with. This is a great way for you to kind of look at adding to your content calendar. So, for example, if you're putting something like this in terms of like the type, it's a video type of content. The details, let's say the video is about how to create a Facebook ad in 5 steps. In this case, it's edutainment. It's educational, but maybe you do it in a creative and funny way because your persona is your Sunny the student. They know that in order for them to continue to pay attention, it's got to be maybe a little bit more humorous and fun. There's a link to that'll be included, and the call to action is email sign up. So you're providing people an opportunity to engage with your content and sign up to emails that'll give them other types of edutainment if that's kind of what your brand is all about. So if there's a white paper, for example, same thing, or a webinar. This is just really a template of the key things that you could include that'll keep you on track with your overall content. You can mix this up. You could add more headings to it if you want to. If there are, sometimes what I do as well, and again, we'll get to this next week on the different types of content calendars. You'll be able to look at, adding the copy, adding what the visual looks like in this as well. And it really is up to you in terms of how much detail you want to include in this. So here's some opportunities in terms of also like how you can make content exciting. So I think I kind of mentioned I can't remember if it was week 1 or week 2, but I mentioned the idea of thumb stopping content. And, that is so true. It's like, what is it that you're going to do that's going to make people stop on their mobile devices or on their desktops, but mostly mobile? How are you going to create that thumb stopping content? And there's a couple of ways that you could do this. Again, it really depends on your audience and what they're into and what they're engaging with. But usually what performs really well is like behind the scenes type of content, flash kind of promotions or deals, maybe they're 24-hour ones or not, account takeovers. So if you have like a celebrity that kind of takes over a brand account and they're able to maybe ask questions, again with Q&As with fans, they can do it via direct messages. Answers can be given through stories. So there's also like, ask me a question feature on Instagram, for example. Great way to kind of create some, exciting content. Live content. So again, that live broadcast in the moment. great engagement opportunity, lives on after the live broadcast is over. On Facebook as well, you're able to promote the live broadcast as well, so it kind of extends that reach out. And then, of course, giveaways and contests are always great ways for people to engage because everybody likes a good contest. So now we're going to get into your assignment 2. What I'm going to do is kind of get into that right now. I'll show you the assignment number 2, so you'll have a link to it. So there's kind of week 3 and 4 assignment. It's combined, so you'll have a link to it. This is all about putting together your content strategy and starting to create that content calendar that will have a certain number of posts that you need to make, and looking at how you're including the owned content versus influencer content, and curated content, and what that content mix looks like, what your CTA looks like. All of the stuff that we just went through is going to be part of your existing content. There's also going to be a week 3 resources document as well in your drive, or in the on Blackboard, that you'll be able to kind of read. There are some pieces that are required that I think are really helpful. So make sure you take the time to read through those. Again, this is, at the end of the day, the real foundation of kind of creating content, or a content plan. At the end of the day, a lot of research goes into it, a lot of that testing, a lot of you looking at what your brand is really all about and stands for. And then, of course, your resources and the realities of you being able to create content and partnering with others to create content is something that you'd have to think about. But also, looking at all of that, how do you get to organize yourself, and how do you get to create a way that you can establish this content calendar that's easy to read, that is continuously ongoing and helps you plan for future content. So again, if you have any questions, let me know via email. Let's continue discussions and sharing on the Facebook group. If you haven't joined the group yet, please make sure you do that. And that's it for today. So thank you so much this is week 3. And I look forward to week 4 with you all. Thanks, everyone.